Well, good morning again. Thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Joe Kramer. I'm the Executive Director of the Michigan Bean Commission, and today is a really special day. I've stolen a little bit of Dr. James Kelly's time today away from his work. I know it's a busy time of the year, Dr. Kelly, and I just think it's an honor to sit here with you this morning. I hope the listeners get a little flavor by the time we're done as to your significance in our industry. I'm going to try to help that along a little bit because I know how humble you are. But if you don't mind, please welcome the distinguished professor, Dr. James Kelly, MSU dry bean breeder. Dr. Kelly, give us a little bit of background on yourself. Where'd you come from?
Okay, good morning, Joe, and good morning, everyone. I grew up in Antrim County, Northern Ireland, not Antrim County, Northern Michigan, but in Northern Ireland. It's the northeastern county of Ireland. You can stand and look over at Scotland there from the Irish coast, looking across the Irish Sea. So when I graduated from college, from the university, Queen's University, Belfast, I came to the University of Wisconsin, where I had an opportunity to study for an advanced degree, a master's degree, and then eventually a PhD, my doctor's degree. And during that time, I had also got the opportunity then to conduct some of my research overseas, and I spent a little over a year and a half at the International Center in Columbia, Cali, Columbia, where I did part of my doctoral research. And when I graduated then from Wisconsin, I joined the Campbell Soup Company in 1975 as their Navy bean breeder. It was a relatively new program. They had initiated a year or so before, and I took that on. Initially, I was located in New Jersey, but I moved out to Napoleon, Ohio, here in the Midwest, that first growing season of '75. And I spent 5 years with Campbell Soup Company. And at that time, they made some managerial changes. They ended the program. But I was able to move into then a position of as assistant plant breeder at Michigan State. So I joined Michigan State in June of 1980, and that's where I've resided for the last 40 years. Yeah.
Wow, what a path! I can't imagine having never worked or lived outside of Michigan. I can't imagine the move from Ireland to the USA. But we're sure glad you made the move. Dr. Kelly, how many years again were you at Campbell Soup?
I spent 5 years there, or 5.5 years, from 1975, January 1975 to June of 1980.
And Michigan State came calling, or how do we recruit you?
Well, what happened with Campbell Soup at that time, they were looking, they couldn't get a real advantage from growing their own material, their own varieties, because they did that, of course, very successfully with tomatoes and fresh vegetables and so forth, or their soups and products and so forth. But with beans, they thought they could have an advantage by growing their own varieties, and that never really materialized. So they moved from beans to pickles. They acquired Vlasic pickles there around 1980, and they made some changes. So they got in some discussions with Michigan State. Michigan State at that time, or the Michigan industry, was looking at expanding. We had the Mexican contracts in 1980. The university wanted to expand the program, not just strictly from navy beans and kidney beans, but into black beans, pinto beans, and so forth. So I was fortunate that they were looking to expand the program, and Campbell's was very good. They donated the genetic materials that I had developed over the course of 5 years or so to Michigan State University. That was part of the package.
Right. It's like dealing with a ball player, isn't it?
I don't know, but that's the way it worked.
Nice,
And some of
nice.
the materials then became varieties here in Michigan then in the early 80s. Yeah.
Michigan State
Yeah.
had an existing dry bean breeding program at that time?
Oh yes. Michigan State, in fact, has the oldest dry bean breeding program in the country. It was established in the early 1900s. In fact, some of the first varieties were released around 1910. But that breeding program, its major focus had been, of course, navy beans and to some degree also kidney beans. So with the changing markets and the expanding markets and the opportunities that the Mexican markets opened for black beans and pinto beans, the program seen a need to expand beyond those classes. And Dr. Adams was the breeder. There he had joined the program about 1960, and he was looking at having some assistance to expand to these other market classes.
Wow, incredible story. I got into the bean business in 1989, I would say, and at that time we were planting a lot of seafair navy beans, as you recall.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
about that time, or shortly thereafter, we started to move toward I'm going from memory here, but I think we moved toward a C20, and that was a big move for our industry. Tell us a little bit about the difference between those two plants.
Well, the Seafarer and the one prior to that, the major one was Sanilac. Sanilac was a major change in plant architectural achievement that was conducted here at Michigan State by the previous breeder, Dr. Downs. And they developed an early maturing bush bean, and that was Sanilac. The prior beans tended to be viney and prostrate and were more susceptible to white mold and so forth. So that revolutionized our industry, and Sanilac became a very widely grown bean in all temperate parts of the world, all the way to New Zealand, Australia, and so forth, and of course into our neighbors in Canada. Seafarer was developed because it was even earlier maturing. And at that time, the St. Lawrence Seaway opened up right in the 1970s, and they wanted an early bean that they could load on the barges there in the Saginaw River, float it down the St. Lawrence and get it out before it froze over. So they needed a bean that was maturing in early September. They could load those. And Seafarer met that need very much. It was early season, high quality, good canning quality, and so forth. However, it suffered from problems of diseases and stress and so forth. And I don't know if you remember back in those times before the EPA stepped in, we would consistently have problems with air pollution and so forth.
Sure.
And that would reduce yields and it would hasten maturity. So Dr. Adams saw the need to diversify. So he looked at, back in the 1970s, he looked at the Central American black beans as an opportunity to broaden the genetic base of beans. And he started making crosses, and he wrote a number of papers and key addresses and that. And that kind of motivated me because I was a student back in that era. And I remember when I was in Columbia, we would walk the nurseries with a Dr. Sanstead, and he also was very interested in improving plant architecture, getting a bean that looked more like a soybean, less of a bush bean like a garden bean or a seafarer. And he identified some lines in those nurseries in Columbia when I was there in the mid-1970s. And those he brought back to Cornell University and released those as the variety Midnight. I think you might remember Midnight has been one of the first upright black beans.
Sure.
When I joined Campbell Soup, I started working with that germplasm, and I worked with a line called NEP2, NEP, which means Nuclear Energy Program. And that was a line that was developed from the same germplasm as Midnight, but was a white bean. It was a mutant, and I used it because I wanted a white bean for navy bean breeding and crossing. And from that crossing, we were able to develop a much more upright bean, bean that was possibly that's opened up opportunities for direct harvest, but also was out yielding Seafarer by something in the order of 20 to 25%.
Wow.
The difference not only in architecture, there was a delay in maturity, or it took longer to mature that kind of a bean, something in the order of 10 to 14 days, depending on season, depending if seafarer came down with air pollution, and so forth. And so there was a transition to get growers to go from that early season variety seafarer to the more upright type. And that took some effort. There was a lot of resistance to accepting something that was going to be longer season, but there was a significant gain in productivity with that. And then eventually growers started the opportunity of the uprights then for the opening up the door for direct harvest.
Wow. Yeah.
That
did change
also,
our industry.
Sorry?
That did change our industry.
It did change the industry. It was one of the key ones. It didn't last long because we had a major disaster in 1986 that you probably recall, the floods.
I do.
And not only did we get 12 inches of rain around the 10th of September, which devastated the crop, but it never dried up after that. And C20, some of the seafarer was already harvested prior to then, or it could be salvaged, whereas the C20 suffered and it never got harvested. So then growers lost some interest in that longer season variety because of that disaster, that natural disaster. But we used it as a parent, as germplasm. We came out with Mayflower as the next variety.
Oh yeah.
The Gentech company came out with Vista. Vista was we call a backcross derived C20. It was they used C20 germplasm, backcrossed it, so Vista was like 98% C20, and it carried resistance to anthracnose. That was the only change in that, and Vista became a very dominant variety, whereas C20 faded largely because, in my opinion, it suffered through that one bad season of '86 and the weather.
1986, yeah.
1986.
I'll never.
It's pretty dramatic.
I won't forget 1986. I got married that year, so right after the flood. I remember it well for many reasons. All good, yeah. All good. So as time evolved, as we work our way toward today, the major classes here in Michigan are certainly the upright varieties, navy beans, black beans, even our small reds, and I think the guys out west are growing mostly upright pinos today too. But as we've evolved with those upright classes, has your focus in research shifted to that risk reward scenario all the time, where you're trying to have shorter days with long day yields, if that makes sense?
Well, yeah. So as you correctly said, we were dealing with navy beans, and of course the black beans were a key part of that development. We could cross between them. And a big part of my early work in the 1980s and so forth was also developing the first upright pinos, Great Northerns, reds, and pinks, and so forth. At the same time, there's always a trade-off in plant breeding. When you start emphasizing one trait over another, there's some cost to that. So one of the things we notice as we tended to maybe put too much emphasis on architecture, there's a cost to yield and so forth, and you're always trying to get that balance. You're still trying to retain a good upright type, but still have the bean produce sufficient, or partition, we say partition to the seed and so forth. So this whole idea with changing environments and changing weather conditions and so forth, it's very important to have an active program where your material, your genetic material, is confronting those changes and so forth. You can retain the architecture, you hopefully can retain the yield, but build on that and so forth. And more and more, we start emphasizing more disease resistance in our material. We started now emphasizing more stress tolerance, which we keep hearing about. And as the weather patterns shift and change, and our growers all are well aware of this, we have to have a variety that has resilience, and That's kind of what we're trying to seek or develop in our current program. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Early in your introduction, you mentioned Colombia, and in my career, I've yet to make it to Cali, to SIAT. I've certainly been to Colombia a few times, but never to that seed facility. Can you tell us a little bit about what happens there and the importance of that to our industry?
Yeah. SIAT, which stands for the International Center for Tropical Agriculture, it's a Spanish acronym, was established around about late 60s, early 70s. And in fact, when I was down there in 72 and 73, they were just building the facility, okay? Wow. And it's one of these international centers that focuses on crop improvement. And see, its mission was to work on beans, have an international or a worldwide mandate to improve beans worldwide, a cassava, which is, a root crop, a starch crop, or yuca it's called in Spanish, and forage pastures for forage production in the big grassland areas of largely, South America and so forth. And they also had a mandate to work on rice. So other centers, there's one in Mexico called CIMMYT. They work on wheat and corn, and then Erie works on rice in the Philippines. So a number of these centers. So there's scientists there have the responsibility to then work towards that specific crop to improve it, and then make the improved germplasm available to small national programs worldwide. So they would make crosses, improve lines, and then they would send that out to small programs in Central America, South America, and in the last 20 years, East Africa has been a big recipient of the improved germplasm they have developed. And so they have played very significant roles in improving the productivity of beans in small consuming nations, less so in Brazil and Mexico that have their own bigger programs,
Sure.
These small countries, like Guatemala and El Salvador, places like that, all have benefited from improved germplasm and improved lines that SIAT has developed in a wide array of seed types and growth habits, because they work not only with bush beans and even upright beans, they have to work with climbing beans, because a good portion of the highland bean production in Ecuador and so forth are climbers and planted in association with corn or whatever. So they have a wide source of germplasm. For years, we had easy access to that germplasm. In other words, it was a matter of just dropping them a line saying we would like some seed of something to use as a parent, and we did that and used that. With seed laws and restrictions and so forth, it's been less easy to have access to that germplasm, which is unfortunate, because not only did they base some of their improvements on what came out of North America, but we also benefit by reciprocating, and that's a big concern for me in plant breeding is as we get a lot of private sector involvement and then restrictions on the flow of germplasm between programs because of setting priorities and plant protection and so forth. Once you start restricting germplasm between programs, you restrict improvement, because to make improvement, you need to have genetic diversity. You need to find new genetics to enhance your current genetics. You build on your current genetics, but you need new genetics coming in. So SIAT was very important in the early years, certainly. Less so in recent years, okay, for those reasons of lack of free germplasm exchange.
You have counterparts throughout the U.S., none of them with your seniority, if you will, but what other universities do you have relationships with in terms of driving breeding?
Yeah, okay. Some of the we have lost some people over the years. The program at Cornell ended. We had active collaboration there. I mentioned Sanstead that I work with there in Cornell. That program has since been closed. We had active collaboration with Colorado State. The breeder there retired a year ago, and they're not looking at really continuing that very actively and so forth. So that's unfortunate. Our main partners and colleagues are North Dakota State University, Dr. Juan Sorno, and Dr. Carlos Urea at the University of Nebraska. They're the two big breeding programs other than Michigan State. There's a smaller effort at the University of California because they work not only on dry beans, they work on lima beans and garbanzos and others. Okay. And then our other partners are not just the public universities, but the USDA, Ag Research, the Agricultural Research Service. We have one colleague here, Dr. Karen Siki, who works on the bean quality aspects. But then I have an active collaborator in Washington, Dr. Miklas, and we experience a lot of germplasm with him and actively work with him. And also Dr. Tim Porch in Puerto Rico. And that's where we get our access to a lot of tropical germplasm, is through his program, because he's a conduit between, he's still a USDA employee in Puerto Rico, but he's a conduit for more tropical germplasm that we can access to help diversify our program here. Yeah. So those are some of the partners that we have. The numbers are shrinking, unfortunately, but that's the situation. And then, of course, we have partners in Canada, and principally University of Guelph,
right,
but also in Manitoba and some degree Saskatchewan.
I think it's an interesting network that I've only learned about in recent years. As a trader, we that stuff just happened around us, right? We didn't get as concerned with it as I do today in this role, but it was certainly a pleasant reminder, reinforcement when I heard some rumor of potentially Dr. Kelly considering retirement. I went to the leadership at Michigan State on behalf of the Bean Commission and asked about the position and wanted to make sure that it was going to continue. And it was great to hear how passionate the leadership there was about the position and their commitment to our industry. And I didn't worry about it from that point on. Obviously big shoes to fill. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I do hear some rumblings of retirement. I think it's fairly public at this point, but have you got a timetable set for yourself?
Yeah, it's next week, Joe. July 1.
I'm glad we got this done.
The date is set, yes. It's now official, yeah.
Well, I honestly kind of knew that, and so today was important for me to get on your calendar and be able to talk to you a little bit. Dr. Kelly, I can't say enough about your contributions to our industry, and certainly on behalf of all the dry bean growers in Michigan and the Michigan Bean Commission, the Production Research Advisory Board, our old mutual friend Greg Varner. We certainly say thank you for all you've done for our industry. I don't know of another individual, and just let me ramble here for a minute, but honestly, I don't know of another individual that's contributed more to the success of our industry than this gentleman. He has been passionate about dry beans. He lives and breathes it. He has made the changes that kept our industry successful. And again, on behalf of all the stakeholders throughout the planet, really, certainly here in Michigan, we appreciate all you've done for us, and we wish you well as you go forward. I do need to point out that you didn't just bring genetics home from Colombia, right? Back in a few years ago, many years ago, you brought somebody else home with you, right?
Yeah, my wife is from Cali, Colombia, correct? Yes.
Yeah, nice. So an Irishman marries a Colombian girl.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Yeah.
Very nice. Well, Dr. Kelly, again, we wish you well. I hope our paths cross. I think we're going to make a point of that. And again, thank you for all you've done. Thanks for making time for us today. And we wish you well as you go forward in the next chapters. Take care.
Joe, it's been a pleasure to work with you, work with the whole bean industry, the whole gamut of people over the years. It's been special to be able to work not only at Michigan State, but also work with an active industry and see the results of our work move out into the hands of growers. So thank you all very much for the support over the years. Goodbye now.
Appreciate it, Dr. Kelly. Take care. All the best.
Bye-bye.